For centuries, behind the golden walls of China's imperial palaces, the tale of one of the world's greatest civilizations wasn't so much written with swords, it was written with seduction. Within these luxurious chambers, emperors didn't simply rule with power. They succumbed to passions that would eventually topple entire dynasties. While some rulers are well known for their military brilliance or wise governance, others are known for far more scandalous motivations. 1,000 concubines, goat-drawn carts, love potions, and hidden excesses sounded more like fantasy, but these were actual tales from the Forbidden City. And as the palace wallowed in pleasure, the empire outside gradually collapsed. This is the untold chapter in China's history, the tale of emperors who opted for gratification over duty and how their personal vices turned public catastrophes. The greediest emperors of Chinese history, power, desire, and the downfall of dynasties. Because at times, the greatest empires don't perish to the swords of enemies, but to the emperor's desires. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today, we're taking a look at a tale that's a little on the spicy side. Have you ever wondered who the greediest emperor in Chinese history was? We've all heard of powerful emperors and legendary battles, but today we're focusing on a very different kind of legacy. The scandalous private lives of rulers who didn't just command armies, but ruled over massive harems, hosted endless parties, and, according to some accounts, had daily bedroom marathons. Even just reading the title, the most lustful emperor in Chinese history, likely makes you wonder. But before we begin with names and anecdotes, let's get some background going. In the ancient Chinese world, concubines were not all about indulgence. They were part of the emperor's responsibility. The main work of these ladies was to assist the emperor in producing heirs, assuring the dynasty's future. Having a lot of women, therefore, was not regarded as extravagant. It was a requirement. But that requirement was more often than not a form of obsession. Emperors got so caught up in the enjoyment that they forgot about their duties as rulers. One of the most extreme instances of this behavior was Emperor Huan of the Han Dynasty. But before we delve into his tale, let's examine two other out-of-control candidates for China's most lustful ruler. First, let's meet a lesser-known but not-to-be-forgotten emperor, Sima Yan, better known as Emperor Wu of the Jin Dynasty. He is not as well known as some other Chinese emperors, but his notorious reputation for excess made him legendary. How legendary? He allegedly had 10,000 concubines. That's not an error, 10,000. Once he became emperor in 266 A.D., Sima Yan allegedly felt lonely on the throne. So he did something extreme. He dispatched envoys across the empire to procure the prettiest unmarried women and bring them to court. Young women from each province, one by one, were selected and transported back to the Forbidden City. The outcome? A harem so large the palace became akin to a royal resort with private rooms and secret corridors. Now consider this. Even if he spent a night with a different woman every day, it would take him more than 27 years to spend an evening with them all. And that's without one day off. By the time he got to the bottom of the list, he'd likely have another lifetime before he could begin again. But here's the really weird part. With so many women, how did Sima Yan decide who he would spend the night with? He developed a strange system using goats. Yes, real goats. Each evening, the emperor would sit in a custom-made carriage pulled by 3 goats and let them wander freely around the palace. Wherever the goat stopped, that was the room he'd visit that night. It was like turning the emperor's private life into a strange kind of lottery guided by animals. And then imagine the suspense within that palace every evening, with thousands of women waiting in silence in hope that the emperor's goats would halt outside their gate. Each evening, thousands of concubines sat quietly in their rooms, their breath caught and ears strained for the distant jingle of goat bells. That sound would be everything. If the goats happened to stop at your doorstep, jackpot. You'd be selected for the emperor's favor that evening. But if they rode on by, heartbreak, disappointment, and most likely weeks or months of waiting to catch another break. And it becomes even wilder. When Sima Yan overthrew the enemy state of Eastern Wu, he didn't merely take their territory. Indeed, he took their emperor's entire harem as well. That added thousands more women to his already enormous collection, and his harem became officially the largest in Chinese history. More than 10,000 women in total. Despite this overwhelming number, legends say that Sima Yan was still known for his incredible stamina. While other emperors spent their reigns on military strategy and governance, Sima Yan focused on his goat-powered matchmaking ritual, and his legacy became less about empire building and more about indulgence. But he wasn't alone. Up next in China's imperial pleasure procession is another big name, Han Dynasty Emperor Cheng. His given name was Liu Ao, and he reigned from 33 to 7 B.C. Although he began with a reputation to uphold, a bright, well-mannered young man with a quality education and a strong family background, once he sat on the throne, all that changed. Next to Sima Yan's 10,000 concubines, Liu's 3,000 harem may sound modest. But in terms of ancient expectations, it was still vast. There was initially much expectation of Liu Ao. His grandfather, the Emperor Xuan of Han, had been one of the most admired of all Chinese rulers. But rather than emulate such stature, Liu plunged headlong into personal excess. His drive for pleasure soon eclipsed any feeling of duty. Legend has it that Emperor Liu Ao would go to 2 separate chambers each and every night, thanks, apparently, to a so-called super stamina potion, which he drank up regularly. Yes, even in ancient China, performance enhancers were part of the tale. Over time, he became better known for his bedroom antics than for any political success. Actually, some accounts say that Liu Ao ended up dying of exhaustion from all the time he spent entertaining his concubines. Whether that is fact or legend, it's a good indicator of how reckless and decadent his reign really was. As with many others, Liu Ao justified his actions by saying he was doing his duty, producing children to serve as heirs to safeguard the dynasty. More women, more sons, after all. At least, that was the reasoning. In the meantime, regular people today have trouble keeping 1 or 2 relationships going. Liu Ao had 3,000 going at once like it was a second job. Behind palace walls, however, his zealous pursuit of pleasure was coming at a high cost. While the emperor indulged in his secret daydreams, the empire crumbled. Famine ravaged. Corruption increased. Public discontent grew. But palace parties never ceased. And when concerned ministers attempted to sound the alarm, he answered not with reform, but with repression. Some were banished, others silenced. Rather than heeding wise counsel, Liu Ao continued his behavior, testimony that untrammeled power frequently ends in perilous decisions. So let's take a step back for a moment and wonder, why did Chinese emperors have so many concubines anyway? Of course, some monarchs certainly did get carried away with hedonistic indulgence, but there was really a system involved, an ancient rationale that governed the whole imperial court. One of the most religious responsibilities of an emperor in traditional Chinese thinking was to perpetuate the dynasty, and to do that, he needed to have male heirs. If there was no successor, the empire might descend into anarchy. Therefore, the greater the number of concubines an emperor had, the higher the chances of having sons to ensure the continuation of the bloodline. Believe it or not, there were even ancient guides that covered how to organize an emperor's harem. One of the earliest, titled The Rites of Zhou, prescribed a set formula: 9 senior concubines, 27 middle-ranked consorts, and 81 lower-ranked women, for a total of 117 official members. And that didn't even count informal additions or unofficial favorites. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, that's the theory. In fact, reality was very different. As Chinese dynasties grew more powerful, so did the size of their harems. By the time of the Han and Tang dynasties, the numbers had completely spiraled out of control. Let's take a look at just how far things went. During the reign of Emperor Huan of the Han dynasty, the same emperor we'll dive deeper into shortly, historical records mention over 20,000 women living within the imperial palace. That's more than the population of some small towns, all confined behind royal walls. And the excess didn't stop there. During the Tang dynasty, Emperor Xuanzong, Ming Huang, as he is better known, had an estimated 40,000 concubines. 40,000. By this time, the harem was not a collection of females anymore. It was a city within a city, a cosmopolitan society with its own set of rules, hierarchies, feuds, and politics. But where did all these females originate? There was an official recruitment process, almost a nationwide contest. Consider the Ming dynasty, for instance. Girls aged 14 to 16 were called from all over the empire to the capital every 3 years. They were assessed according to family, education, manners, looks, you name it. Only the best got to enter the palace. And beauty was not always the goal. Emperors at times chose women for their brains, their wit, or even their political affiliations. The harem wasn't simply a love retreat, a setting of romantic indulgence. It was also a site of politics and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Now, let's answer the question on everyone's mind. With thousands of women, how did the emperor ever get any work done? As it turns out, it was anything but impromptu. There was a stern, near-military system for controlling imperial intimacy. Records of the time speak of so-called 15-night rotation. This is how it went. During a 15-night period, the emperor would be assigned to sleep with 1 empress, 3 high-ranking consorts, 27 mid-ranking concubines, and 81 lower-ranking ones. That's 112 women in more than 2 weeks, and that only began to cover a fraction of the entire harem. The others, thousands of women, waited, competing, and often never seen at all by the emperor. Picture being selected, removed from your home, brought into the palace with visions of love or prestige, only to spend decades waiting behind golden screens, trusting that perhaps the emperor's goat-drawn vehicle would pass in front of your door just once. On the surface, life in the imperial harem must have seemed a dream. Elegant gowns, lavish quarters, exquisite food. But behind closed doors, it was frequently a golden cage, a place of jealousy, loneliness, and unspoken despair. Some of China's most celebrated poets recorded this sorrow with their words. One well-known line of verse by Tang Dynasty poet Bai Juyi records Emperor Xuanzong's infatuation with his favorite concubine, Yang Guifei. In the imperial harem, 3,000 beauties, yet all of his love is given to one. 3,000 women, and only one claimed his heart. For the others, it was a lifetime of solitude and abandoned hopes, concealed behind silk curtains and marble corridors. For many, palace life was rather less fairy tale and more ruthless survival game. And finally, we look to the emperor who most exemplifies the worst of this whole saga, Emperor Huan of the Han Dynasty, whose real name was Liu Ji. He reigned from 146 to 168 A.D., and as opposed to those emperors who are remembered for their conquests in war or wise leadership, Emperor Huan is remembered for the opposite. His was a reign of excess, corruption, and the gradual disintegration of an empire. Much of that decline started with his personal life. Liu Ji was utterly indulged in pleasure. His harem was enormous, his fiestas never ceased, and his dedication to actually running the empire virtually non-existent. As the nation suffered crisis after crisis, famine, rebellion, widespread corruption, Emperor Huan sat trapped in his world of fantasy, living in luxury while the empire dissolved into chaos around him. Worse still, the individuals who ought to have counseled him, advisors, intellectuals, faithful public servants, were either removed, muzzled, or in certain instances, compelled to take their own lives. Whoever dared oppose his way of life was quickly eliminated. To their place, the emperor's inner circle came to be occupied by crooked eunuchs and power-grabbing manipulators who manipulated the emperor's vulnerabilities to suit their own interests. As Liu Ji wandered deeper into decadence, they solidified their hold on the empire, manipulating him as a puppet for their purposes. At the same time, the emperor himself remained in denial, enveloped in silk, basked in beauty, and completely divorced from the misery of his people. Banquets, new concubines, extravagantly staged performances. The palace was filled with revelry, even as the empire fell into chaos. By Emperor Huan's final years, the Han Dynasty had fallen apart completely. The central government was chaotic. The masses were incensed. Rebellions smoldered throughout the country, and yet, within the palace walls, there was never-ending partying. Emperor Huan became the ultimate metaphor for what happens when power corrupts, when a leader loses sight of the fact that leadership is a matter of service, not selfishness. No wonder his name still crops up as one of the blackest eras in Han Dynasty history. So what can we really learn from all these outlandish tales of imperial harems, love potions, and goat-drawn carriages? Yes, it's easy to ridicule the absurdity. 10,000 concubines, a goat-powered bedroom lottery, ancient stamina potions. But beneath the melodrama is an undercurrent of a greater truth, one that resonates today. Being an emperor in ancient China wasn't just about commanding armies or passing laws. It came with enormous pressure to protect the dynasty, especially through producing male heirs. In that context, maintaining a large harem wasn't just a personal indulgence, it was seen as a political necessity. But as we've seen with Sima Yan, Liu Ao, and Emperor Huan, that system often crossed the line into obsession. What began as a formal method of succession soon turned into an excuse for unbridled pleasure, pure extravagance, and complete abandonment of responsibility. Let's go back for a moment. Sima Yan, the emperor with a goat-powered love chariot and 10,000 concubines. In theory, he was a successful emperor. He built his empire and overthrew competing states. But history prefers to remember him more for his decadent personal life than for political successes. Then Liu Ao, who had a powerful legacy from his grandfather, frittered it away in nights of indulgence and 3,000 concubines. Rather than consolidating the empire, he left office and ushered in unrest, famine, and corruption. And Emperor Huan, note man who actually allowed his empire to rot from within. While his people starved, he continued to party. While his foes got the better of him, he continued to avoid doing his job. His reign is known as one of the most humiliating downturns in Han history. And it all began with misplaced priorities. But here's the bad news. These aren't one-off stories. Throughout time, in all parts of the globe, whenever the rulers yield to decadence and forget their responsibility, the outcome is always the same: downfall, uprising, and remorse. Ancient Rome, medieval Europe, and yes, imperial China. The cycle repeats over and over again. But aside from the politics and the emperors, let us not forget the thousands of women who found themselves within these harems. For these women, life was far from glamorous. Imagine being 14 or 15, stolen from home and brought to the palace, having to constantly vie for the emperor's favor. The majority would wait decades, even years, never once being seen, locked up in prison chambers of gold, spending their lives in silence and doubt. And for others who did gain the emperor's affection, things did not necessarily improve. Ask Yang Guifei, favorite of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Her tale, set to immortality in the poem The Song of Everlasting Sorrow by Bai Juyi, describes how the emperor adored her so much he forgot his empire. That same devotion brought about jealousy, political strife, and eventually her downfall. It's the same old thing. When private desire trumps duty, both nations and leaders pay the price. Take the Han Dynasty. Once one of China's greatest empires, during the time of Emperor Huan, it was plagued by corruption, famine, rebellion, and political decline. But still, the court went on hosting decadent banquets, accumulating women, and silencing critics. And it didn't stop there. His replacement, Emperor Ling, trod along the same path to destruction. Larger harem, greater corruption, and more control yielded to ambitious eunuchs. The empire didn't merely decline, it fell apart. It wasn't long before the dynasty folded. By the time 220 A.D. rolled around, the great Han Dynasty, formerly the world leader in innovation, culture, and strength, was gone. A civilization that had been upright for so many centuries collapsed under the tyranny of its own excess. Because the truth is plain. Power without restraint is a risky business. Whether we're talking about an emperor in ancient China or a world leader today, the lesson is the same. When those in charge forget their duty to the people, collapse becomes inevitable. Naturally, the world is different these days. Leaders aren't measured by the number of harems, but temptation, extravagance, and unbridled indulgence, they never go out of fashion. Social media standing lavish existences, personal notoriety, contemporary manifestations of excess may appear to be different, but they behave in the same way. History continues to caution us. When leaders are more interested in themselves than in the people they lead, the price is never long in coming. So the next time you hear one of those crazy stories about emperors with 1,000 concubines, bedroom lotteries fueled by goats, and around-the-clock palace parties, go ahead, roll your eyes, shake your head, but also keep in mind what's beneath the surface. because these are more than just sensationalized stories from history. They're ageless warnings about the dangers of unchecked power and neglected responsibility. All right, guys, that concludes our dive into China's most lustful emperors, from Sima Yan's mythical harem, to Liu Ao's scandalous endurance, to the infamous neglect of Emperor Huan. History has a way of both entertaining and cautioning us. And though some of them are drawn from ancient annals and have probably been sprinkled with legend and exaggeration, they still provide a compelling glimpse of the clash of power, desire, and obligation, and the harm that can result. If you like this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next crazy and interesting story from history we have lined up for you.